I lost my son Matthew because he took what he thought was a Xanax, and it was laced with fentanyl. And I found his body a few days afterwards. He had the biggest heart. He had eyelashes that his teachers always said that they could never stay mad at him because his eyelashes were so long. He loved to fish. He worked at our church very often, lots of youth group activities.
Matthew was my eldest grandson, a vibrant, handsome, smart young man who had his whole life ahead of him. He was 20 years old when street drugs took his life.
He was born with transposition of the great vessels. So it's where his pulmonary and his aortic valves in his heart were backwards. So he had open heart surgery at 10 days old. They did the switch. And then at 5 years old, he was having chest pain. So he got flown to the Children's Hospital and had a second open heart surgery. And then right as COVID was in full force, he had just turned 18 the month before and had to have open heart surgery for the third time. We were still living in Texas, me and my husband, and Mathew had moved here to Florida. So I drove down here to try to be with him, and you know that hassle, trying to be allowed into the hospital, and they're like, he's 18. I said, he just turned 18. He's scared. He doesn't know what's going on. So he definitely was a fighter from the very beginning.
I always called him Koa. Koa is Polynesian for warrior. 20 years old, and he went through 3 heart surgeries. The first one at 10 days old, the second one at 5, and the third one at 18.
The last one was the hardest on him. I mean, of course, when he was a baby, he didn't know any different. When he was 5, he bounced back really quick. I remember Sister Misty and a couple of the other ladies in our church, he would get up and was worshiping and dancing and jumping just a few weeks after surgery. And they're like, should he be doing that? Is he okay? And I said, he's all right. But this last one, when he was 18, took a real toll on him. He didn't like the pain. He was not the best patient. He struggled a lot medically after that.
He was very, very strong. There were times I looked at Mathew and I was kind of jealous of his strength because it took a lot for him to go through 3 open heart surgeries by the time he was 18 years old and still, have a zest for life, still, want to. He honestly was more normal than a lot of kids at his stages of life, and that's really a lot of times all that he wanted. He wanted to be just like all the other kids.
He always resented not being able to play contact sports and not do the things he wanted to do growing up. But I think emotionally, this last surgery took a major toll on him. When he was a teenager, he started experimenting with marijuana, drinking alcohol. He drank a lot. He ended up getting a DUI right before his third open heart surgery. And so he went through a lot trying to get his license back, and he seemed to use prescription drugs, the Xanax.
In some ways, that is kind of what led him to toying with marijuana and experimenting with those things in his teenage years. I think it was something that he felt like he had a connection with the other kids that were doing that stuff, and he so often in his life was told no. No, you can't play football. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. And when he got around these friends that was doing drugs, it was something that, I guess in a way he felt like he had a sense of control.
But his brother was having some more serious problems with meth and some other things. And Mathew wanted to help his brother. And he's like, Mom, we got to help him or he's going to end up dead or in prison. And he came down here to try to help me help his brother. And in the process, once he came down to Brevard County, he was only here 3 months. And someone at his work introduced him to meth. And he started using that and using Xanax and his pills and just trying to ease his pain and his frustrations. And
Mathew was a risk taker. He wanted so much more in life. He was like, when he passed, he had been living with me for a while, and that was by choice. He decided that he wanted different for his life than where he saw it was going. So he moved in with my husband and I. He made promises that we were holding him to, that, we wanted him to do what he said he wanted to do. He wanted to turn a new leaf. He wanted to be, he said, in his own words, a good example for his younger siblings. And he wanted all the kind of freedoms and independence that, typically comes with a 20-year-old in their life. He wanted to get out on his own. He wanted to build a life and be adventurous and explore, have a girlfriend, get married someday, have kids. And we all wanted that for him, and we all looked forward to having those experiences and seeing his life take that turn. Sadly, his life was cut short, and none of that happened.
the police think that he passed away Saturday, early morning, or Friday, late evening. And I found him on Father's Day that Sunday. I had actually texted him on Friday evening, or I called him, and he didn't answer. He texted me back and said, "Is everything okay? Can I call you tomorrow at 5?" Which I thought was a little odd that he gave me an exact time tomorrow. But I said, "Yeah, that's fine." Friday evening at midnight, me and my husband were watching TV, and I had got up to use the bathroom. And I can't explain it, but I was in the bathroom and I had this gut-wrenching pain in my stomach, and I just knew. It's like I knew. I had this feeling that he was gone, and I didn't know how to explain it. I just had this overwhelming fear of doom for him, and I went to my husband and I'm like, "We need to pray for Mathew. We need to pray for him right now. And we prayed and we went to bed. And then the next day, I tried to call him a few times and he didn't answer. But my other son said that Mathew had talked to a mutual friend of theirs. So I was like, okay, I think he's probably fine. Maybe he's just busy or working. Then Sunday came and it's Father's Day and no response from him at all. I'm still not answering the phone, going straight to voicemail. So I told my husband, I said, we need to go check on Mathew because he was living with my mom at the time and she was out of town. So we drove over there and I let myself in and I walked to his room area and there's blinds, like a sliding glass door because he had his own section, like a guest suite area. And when I got to the blinds, I saw him laying there on the ground. And I'm a nurse. I knew as soon as I looked at him, I knew he was gone. His phone was laying in the middle of the bed. He was laying out flat on his back on the floor. He was bruised. His skin was just discolored from being there so long like that. And he had even emesis from his mouth still. And there was like blood dripping from his eyes and his nose. He was just so cold. And all I could do was scream. And that's how I found my baby. I actually called my mom, who was out of town, and I was just screaming over the phone that Mathew was gone.
I got the most horrific call, and it was of my daughter screaming. It's a scream I'll never get out of my head. It came from the very depths of her soul. And my mom, God rest her soul now, my mom, all I could think to say was no. Oh my God, no. And my mom heard me from the other room, and she just was like, what's going on, Lavanis? What's going on? I couldn't get it out. I kept having to tell her, Mama, I'll talk to you in a minute. I'll talk to you in a minute. I couldn't do anything for my daughter. I couldn't bring Mathew back. I couldn't wrap my arms around her. All I could do was tell her I loved her and I'd be home as soon as I could. And I was.
It took her a few minutes to calm me down enough to ask me, did you call 911? And I was like, no. So I hung up and called them. I guess they weren't my first call because I knew what I was looking at.
But when I got home, my whole world had changed. I couldn't look at my house the same way. I couldn't go into the room where he passed for months. I just asked my husband to close the blinds. My relationship with my daughter, she got so withdrawn. And I mean, you can't. I was mourning too. I wanted to mourn with her, but I also knew that the best thing to do was not push, that she had to mourn in her own way. But just remind her that I was there. I wasn't sure if I could ever live in my home again and look and go in that room again. And eventually, I mean, time has a way of providing some peace and healing for some. For me personally, I'm religious at heart. I believe in the good Lord above, and I choose to believe that Mathew is no longer hurting, and that he's with my family of angels that passed before him, and that he would want his story to be told, because I know that Mathew did not want to leave this world that way when he did.
So the police came, the coroners came. There was drugs in the room, paraphernalia, different pills, and we had, they collected all of that. They took his phone. His phone had multiple text messages from Friday night of him asking this particular person for Xanax as much as he could get. He would pay for it. Back and forth between these guys. We had video footage on the Ring camera of this person pulling up to my mom's. Not the best view of the license plate, but enough that they had something to go on. Nothing ever came of it. I called the police station multiple times. Never got anything. No response other than there was nothing they could do. I got his phone back about 7-8 months later. I even called the state of Florida's state police, because they have, I guess, jurisdiction sometimes over some of the counties, and was told that they would look into it and get back to me, and they never did. So last year I went to the fentanyl summit here in Orlando. The DEA was there. There was a whole bunch of different organizations there. I did tell a little bit of Mathew's story, a brief few minutes. I had a DEA agent actually come up to me afterwards and tell me he wanted to help me, and he didn't understand exactly what happened, but something should have been done. So I worked with him. And ultimately it came down to, he did find who that person was, but he told us, unfortunately, the police did not do their job. And because of that, there was no way to prosecute this person for Mathew's death, but they would do whatever they could to try to prosecute for something else so this person would be off the streets. He said that they should have used that phone conversation, like text that person, set up a meeting so they could secure that, yes, this person had the phone at that moment, but none of that was done. So there'll never be any justice for my son. I'm so grateful for him, even though nothing came of it. The fact that I took 2 minutes to talk about Mathew at that summit, that they reached out to me and actually cared enough to investigate it. And he did come down and he did talk. He said it took a lot to get the police department to work with them at first, because that detective wasn't there anymore. But the fact that he actually tried and he responded to my messages, and I felt heard for the first time. Don't let up on your police departments. Make them do their jobs. Sometimes you have to ride them and be a pain in their ass to get them to do their job. If it was their child laying there that they found, they would do their job. Stop acting like our kids don't matter because he had some drugs in his room. Who cares? He didn't ask for fentanyl. He asked for Xanax.
I think he wanted to make his mark known on this world and not this way. And but I know that he would want us to feel as if he's not hurting anymore and that he's at peace. And that's what I hold on to in my heart. And so eventually I had my husband open those blinds. And as hard as it was, I stood at that door and I let the memories of Mathew flood me. And even like now, I mean, I think about Mathew and I smile because I have wonderful memories of him riding a little big wheel in the hospital after his second surgery, right down the hospital hallway. I have memories of him in my old house in the backyard, him and his brothers and sisters, being, siblings and competing with one another on who could catch the football or who could swim the furthest, or just so many wonderful memories. Going out deep sea fishing was one of the last things that we ever did, and we had a ball with that. But most of all, memories of the love that Mathew added to our family. And I refuse to let go of that. So I rejoice in his memory. I also, and most importantly, just want the world to know that Gary Mathew Dzikoski Jr., he mattered, and we loved him. We will always love him.